This is Eric Miskell with EMS Now, and welcome to this edition of EMS Now Up Close. Today, it's my pleasure to be speaking for the first time with Mr. El Teo, who is the CEO of PCI Limited. And PCI, as you're about to discover, is a specialty EMS currently based, or now based, I should say, out of Singapore, but with an interesting history. So as we begin, I'm going to ask EL to maybe tell the history, introduce himself, and tell the history of PCI so people understand who this company is. EL, welcome. If you could maybe tell us a little about your company, please.
All right, thank you, Eric, for this introduction. Yeah, my pleasure to be in this meeting with you. Right, so PCI. I've been with PCI for almost 26 years. I joined the company in 1995. And interestingly, if we look back, this year, 2021, is actually the 50th anniversary of the company. We started actually in 1971, right, in the Bay Area, privately owned then by an American family. So if you look back, PCI was actually an American company then. 50 years has been a very, very long journey, right? So maybe I could just give a quick history walkthrough, right?
Please.
Over that. So as a company then, I think it was just a bareboard shop. So I was told that if you speak to the engineers who are now probably in the 60s and 70s in the Bay Area, if you say, yeah, they will say, oh, I know this company, because during that time in the 1970s as a bareboard shop, we actually support a lot of prototype house in the Bay Area, right? So the names ring a bell for that generation of engineers in the Bay Area. So started in 1971 as a bareboard shop. The company actually evolves. I would say that if I could break it down into like 3 phases of the history, the first phase I would say is like the first 20 years, right? We went through some interesting development then. 8 years after the company was founded, roughly in 78, 79, we actually started a division called the LCD module making. So besides being a bareboard shop, we also started a division in LCD module making, right? To sell LCD modules to, again, electronic OEM firms, right? It was roughly in the early 1980s that we started a contract manufacturing division. So by the early 1980s, PCI was then a company with 3 capabilities: bareboard shop, LCD making, and contract manufacturing. Now, why contract manufacturing? Because it's very logical. For OEM to buy PCB boards, buy LCD module, they will say, hey, why not you just come together and just build products for me, right? So that's how the contract manufacturing business started. So I think that went through like the first 20 years. And in between that, there was a change of owner. The owner actually sold off the company in the 1980s to a Singapore-based owner, right, who was not really in electronics, but just buying PCI in 100% as an investment, right? So the first phase, again, is just the birth of the various division and contract manufacturing. Now, when we went to the second phase, I would say it's probably in the late 1980s or 1990s as a milestone. We were pretty much having business more pivoted towards the EMS contract manufacturing business. But at that time, in the second phase, 1990s to early 2000, mid 2000, we were primarily a build-to-print company, right? We call EMS, but build-to-print. We have very, very limited design capabilities because our design were primarily focused on, we call human-machine interface, things that is evolving around LCD display because of our history, our background in producing display. So we have deep knowledge in designing HMI control panel types, right? So I think that pretty much was our main core expertise of business in the EMS space, right? Doing build to print, but if customers want some design of control panels with LCD, we could do that.
Yeah.
So that pretty much took us into the main second phase focus business of build to print.
Yeah.
And I joined in 1995. I've seen that second phase activities, right? Now, interestingly, when we were discussing within the management team, then to say, do we want to continue just to do contract manufacturing with limited experience or expertise in design? We say we probably can't continue to do things like this because various front of competition, pressures from margin. So we decided, hey, why not we invest in a small team of engineers, right? Let them go and play around with technology, right? We call it advanced engineering team, right? It is not R&D. I think R&D is more like really work with may not have any commercial value. But when we want to set up an advanced engineering division, then in the mid 2000, we say we must have the commercialization objective in mind. Let the engineers play around with technology platforms that our customers may be looking at in 2 to 3 years from now. So that's how the things evolve. So along that thinking, we started with a very small team. We first started with broadening our knowledge in human-machine interface. Again, things that is around touch screen, touch sensor. We actually got some good fruition eventually. That got customers that came to us to say, hey, I like a more advanced know-how in HMI. We let you do something along that, right? That will be off. And we found that strategy, that thinking seems to be working quite well. Small crew of engineers play around with technology. We expanded the team, expanded our know-how into other areas like embedded system, right? And then from embedded system, we evolved into telematics. From telematics, we actually evolved to today, very deep know of IoT.
Was the team, the engineering team, still in California, or was this in Singapore now?
It was in Singapore.
Okay.
So when the operation or the company are being sold off by the American family to a Singapore-based company, then everything has moved to Singapore.
Okay.
So our engineers, which I'll talk about the deployment, actually grew from a very small team then to now we have about 65 engineers deployed mainly in Southeast Asia. So that's I would say a little bit of history behind that. Yeah. So I would say today PCI, I think it has evolved to the present time, has the capabilities to do ODM business, right? Yeah. So a brief walkthrough.
No, I appreciate that. And it's funny, you said in there that, and it seemed to be that in the 80s, all of the small contractors were saying, oh, I can do that. I can do that. And that was, right. You know, as OEM said, can you help with this? They'd say, oh yeah, I can do that. And then they quickly kind of learned how to do that and got caught up. So, so you joined in 1995 as a procurement manager, and you've seen a lot, and you just described a lot of change that the company has gone through. And it sounds like it was kind of a planned change, you know, even though there was some, you know, it wasn't just, let's just see how this goes. It was a planned change, and you stepped through that very nicely. You also made the decision to move, or the company made the decision to move entirely over to Singapore and to be based there, which made sense at that time. I remember Singapore used to be considered a low-cost center, right, back then in the EMS. That certainly has changed, but it always had very well-regarded supply chain management and electronics manufacturing industry capabilities. And I think that remains to this day. It's still, you know, one of the premier spots on the planet, I think. So let's talk about your footprint these days, the geographic regions. As I understand it, you're headquartered in Singapore, but you have production in 2 countries and also design capability centers in 2 different countries. Why don't you explain that for us, please?
Yeah, I'll do that. Most that headquarters in Singapore, like what you just said. Pretty much in Singapore, we have our management office, the HR function, customer service, and also we have our design center of excellence out from Singapore, because we also has test lab, very sophisticated test system based out from Singapore. So we have evolved over years to develop and strengthen that type of capabilities. Factory-wise, we have manufacturing operation in Indonesia as well as in China. And interestingly, we have been in Indonesia, if I do the count, it's coming to 32 years. We set up the factory there in 1989, right? And China, we went in the early 2000s. So in China, we are coming close to like 20 years. So that's our so-called footprint in manufacturing operation. Now, design center, like I said earlier, we have a team of engineers in Singapore. We also have a team of engineers in Manila, Philippines, right? We have about 20 over engineers there. And we also have a few engineers in Indonesia, not in the location where we are in the manufacturing plant, but it's in a city called Bandung, right? Bandung is actually very well known for their technology university, the #1 technology university is in Bandung. That's why we decided to set up a crew of design engineers there. So design engineering team in Singapore, Philippines, and Indonesia, right? And we also have a couple of salespeople in the United States. So there's broad deployment of resources in this region, US.
Yeah. And the facility that you have in Indonesia is interesting to me because it's in Batam, which is not that far from Singapore, right? So it's very close proximity. I forget in terms of miles or time, but so it actually, and I have an old colleague in the industry, old executive that I used to work with, and he loved that solution. He said Batam, he thought off Singapore was one of the premier spots to kind of manufacture, because it leveraged Singapore, but yet also would be considered a low-cost place with high-skilled labor. Tell us about that a little bit. Am I characterizing that correctly about Batam and where you are there?
Yeah, perfect. Actually, that was a very nice characterization of the plant. So like what you said earlier, Singapore used to be a fairly low-cost site on the region in the 1970s, the 1980s, you know. And of course, cost viability became a bit of challenge in Singapore to do manufacturing. That's why we actually moved to Batam. Very close to Singapore. It's like 25 miles south, cross the border. We go there by ferry. And I would say that it's very viable to do large scale manufacturing. So our plant over there, currently we have about 150,000 square feet of manufacturing there. I would say very high tech, very sophisticated SMT operation, complex back-end assembly process there. And we actually leverage, because of the proximity, we could leverage a lot of management expertise, supply chain expertise out from Singapore. So it's just like a stone throw away, even though it's just across the water. So it's very, very well integrated. There's a total supply chain manufacturing solution, Singapore and Batam coming together like a nicely fitted jigsaw, right?
Yeah. Well said. And I want to follow up on the design in just a moment, but before I go there, just for the benefit of the audience, maybe talk a little about the industry sectors that PCI primarily serves currently.
Sure. Before I talk about that, maybe I will also just step back the history. So I would say that in the first phase and second phase of the history I described, we were primarily serving the consumer industry, very high volume, just for the nature of the things that we do, LCD display, right? We do very little in the industrial space, so-called, right? And probably none then in the medical space. But because of the competency and the skill set that we developed, in fact, today I would say that we are pretty much pivoting ourselves into 4 main segments. Industrial, right? Commercial segment. We call it the smart home. That's our technology term. The market space that serve IoT, wireless, high-end, more premium consumer type of products, not very high volume, but very premium, which require a lot of technology. So that is the third segment. And the last one is telematics. we are pretty much very embedded in this segment of business with very good solutions. So I would say 4 segments: mid volume, high mix, low volume type of business environment. Yeah.
And where are your customers? Not by name, but kind of, are they primarily Asian, building for the local market, or are they more? You referenced before that I'm in Dallas, that you've been through the airport here a few times. You know,
Yeah, right.
So, if you could characterize kind of your customer base, kind of where are they?
Sure. Actually, interestingly, I would say 75% of our customer base are out from the United States. Yeah, and we have about 20% in Europe, and the balance like 5-10% out from Asia. So very, very much still a very US centric business marketplace that we continue to be working with. Yeah.
Okay. And are the products then, where are the products delivered? Is that to within the region though, within Asia, or is those then shipped to the United States and Europe? And
oh, I would say the product shipment is still primarily back to the United States, right? So the percentage is probably 60% product shipped to US, about 30% into Europe, because the US companies will have manufacturing in Europe, and also the balance are still into Asia. So very much similar to the market segment, geographically wise, pivoted to.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let me move now into kind of discussion of the services that you provide, and I don't want to get into the traditional PCBA box, because it's clear that you do. I mean, that's table stakes these days, right? I mean, in order to differentiate and to set yourself apart, you do more. And so PCI has some technology platforms that you've created for certain types of products as well, for the benefit of your customers. And as you referenced it before on the ODM side. So please tell us about that.
Sure. So I think I will still talk pretty much about what differentiate PCI, right? The type of things we do. I think it's pretty much hinging on our engineering design platform solutions, right? Like I mentioned, our engineers play around solutions, but when we play, I use the word play, it's more coming out with platform solutions. Now, these are not actually what we call reference design. We actually moved the scale even upward. We came out with prototype solutions that we studied the market, we studied with our customers. These are the type of solution platform that the customer will want. So we actually move the scale. If we say reference design that many companies sell is like a scale of 2 to 3 on the readiness to market the product, we are probably in the scale about 7 to 8. So that when the customer look at our solutions, like in human machine interface or in embedded system, single board computer, just to illustrate, they say, okay, the work required to adopt your solution platform with prototype ready to demonstrate, for them to go to market, we actually shorten the lead time a lot. So that is one of our so-called differentiating factors. The solution platform go to prospective customers or go to existing customers. They say, okay, please help us to go to market with your solution. And the time to market, the speed of execution is in fact one of our very differentiating expertise. So besides engineering, which I know many companies also have that skill set, the time to help customers market the product is one of our edge in the market, right? So I can elaborate, like human machine interface, anything with touch screen. We have the expertise of choosing display because of our background and history. Embedded system, we are very locked into all the advanced Android environment now. Right?
Yeah.
In terms of telematics, we have ready solutions for deployment into even the upcoming EV market in the future, right?
Oh, wow.
And we also have integrated IoT solution. So these are some of the solutions. Yeah. And when a customer comes to us, is solution ready. Yeah.
Solution. And part of that I wonder is you have what the single board computer?
Yes.
Kind of, is that apply to all 4 of those sectors as well, or?
Yes, it does, because Interestingly, you brought up this point because a Singapore computer is the brain or the heart of a lot of devices, right? Because we have specialized knowledge there with solutions ready to go. It can, in fact, this became one of the core platform for us to leverage on to develop our telematic solution, which require a certain computing power, right? If you talk about HMI, right,
Yep.
human machine, they also set as a base for computing power.
Mhm. Okay. Excuse me. You jumped ahead of me there a bit, so I'll follow up on that. I was going to ask you kind of what you thought after all these years makes PCI special, but you've been speaking to that with your design and your engineering talent. It's clear that that's really kind of the differentiator that you leverage and your ability to kind of be innovative in the designs and to manufacture at a high quality and get it there quickly. I guess my follow-up question to that would be, how important is it then, and how do you manage then to have the leading edge equipment to do this and also kind of advanced supply chain tools? How critical is that to your ongoing success?
Actually, it's very critical. So one of our philosophy in the company is that the management team has always got to look ahead, right? Trying to be ahead of the curve in any all the areas that we operate. So this design engineering part is something that we want to continue to maintain the advancement, right? Like today, we have a very clear engineering design roadmap for the next 3 years until 2024, right? To look at what are the evolvement in single board computer technology, HMI, display technology, or even telematics, IoT. So we have that very clearly lined up so that we can always prepare and be ready to demonstrate future solution to customers, right? So that's on the design context. And of course, importantly, our supply chain team is always in tandem in this vision. They always got to be ready with supply base that is capable to do that type of technology front when we need to deliver solutions to the market. So integrating this supply base to the design team has been very critical, and like for us, it's a very integrated ecosystem within the company. Right?
Okay. And I'd imagine that since PCI was built, it wasn't cobbled together through different acquisitions, that the production base, the equipment and the tools that you're using will be standardized across between your facilities.
Yes, correct. So the nice part is that we always will take the view that our both plants are interchangeable, right? I use the word interchange, means we have a common platform on our SMT operation. Hardware-wise, we have that. Software is also standardized, and the methodology of execution is also standardized, so that we can actually move product manufacturing throughout the both location readily.
Excellent.
Sure.
Now, so tell me, kind of, what's the culture at PCI like? It sounds like it's very kind of, I want to say techie, but not in a bad way, right? It's very kind of engineering centric, very kind of forward thinking. How would you describe it?
I would describe PCI. Okay, just on the cohort, I think if you look at the non-production guys in terms of the people in the management execute, we have close to half of our people are engineering trained guys background, right? And I would say we are a very nimble organization, very proactive in our thinking. We put a lot of focus in our service responsiveness, which is very important in EMS, right? And of course, speed of execution. I think these are some of the attributes I would characterize the organization.
Yeah. And that's interesting you said that with the customer service focus, because obviously it's all about servicing those OEM customers. How have you seen over your 25, maybe 26 years now this year with PCI, how have you seen those relationships and the requirements for servicing those relationships change?
Yeah, I think that it certainly has changed, because as you have seen in this in the EMS space, working with OEM, they have been relying on OEM in the past for manufacturing, right? And it evolves into supply chain management, right? And most recent years, I would say in recent 10 years, putting their OEM focus on product marketing and branding. They really like shifting out a lot of partnership other than supply chain manufacturing, scale upwards to expect the EMS guys engagement to do product design, right? I think that was the evolvement of the whole EMS guys engagement with the OEM, right? A lot more work that is taking over from the OEM. So I think the OEM focusing on branding, marketing, like we have seen a lot of successful companies today, I think it's adopting a very nice model.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds as if, you know, OEMs used to, and it's more high volume. Maybe it's because of the sectors you've chosen to compete in. You've made it very clear you're not in the consumer market, right? Where that's very interchangeable and it may be mostly price driven. It sounds as if your relationships with your customers tend to be a lot more sticky, a lot more that you're much more engaged and you become a part of their team almost. Would that be kind of an accurate representation?
That's perfectly accurate. Actually, Eric, just to share, our top 10 customers, the average years that we have been with them is about 15 years. And we have 2 to 3 customers has been with us for more than 30 years, 31, 32 years, right? So even before I joined the company. So I would say very nice relationship. We truly appreciate those partnerships. But again, a company that we always believe in long-term partnership in this space of EMS service.
Yeah. No, congratulations. That is, I mean, that's a testament right there. You're absolutely.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to kind of transition a bit now from the focus so much on PCI to talk more about the industry in which you compete.